Picture this scenario, because I guarantee you've made this assumption before. You're at a backyard barbecue, and you meet someone who's a doctor. They're 45, they live in a nice house in a good neighborhood, they drive a new BMW, the kids go to private school. You think to yourself, this person is rich. They probably have $1 million saved. Or you meet someone else who's 52, works as a plumber, drives a 10-year-old truck, lives in a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class area. You think they're doing fine, but they're not wealthy. What if I told you that statistically, the plumber is far more likely to have a $500,000 net worth than the doctor? What if I told you that most people's assumptions about who has money are completely backwards? That the visible markers of wealth, the nice car, the big house, the fancy job title, are often inversely correlated with actual net worth? What if I told you that the average person with a $500,000 net worth doesn't look anything like what you think, and understanding who they actually are will completely change how you build wealth? My name is Kyle, and I spend way too much time analyzing the data on who actually accumulates wealth versus who just looks wealthy. If you've ever wondered why some people who make great money seem broke, while others with modest incomes retire early, or if you're trying to figure out if you're on track compared to people who are actually building wealth, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up, because today we're not talking about celebrity net worths or billionaire advice. We're talking about the actual profile of people with $500,000 saved, and it's going to surprise you. Let me start by showing you the data, because this completely destroys the narrative you've been sold. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, only about 10% of American households have a net worth over $500,000. That sounds exclusive, like you need to be a high earner or inheritance recipient to get there. But when you look at who those people actually are, it's shocking. The median age of someone with a $500,000 net worth is 61 years old. Not 35, not 45, 61. That's the first surprise. Wealth takes time. The people with $500,000 didn't get there in 10 years. They got there in 30 or 40 years of consistent, boring decisions. The median household income of people with $500,000 net worth is about $120,000. Not $300,000, not $500,000, $120,000. That's solidly upper middle class, but it's not rich. It's 2 teachers married to each other. It's a mid-level manager and a nurse. These are not people who stumbled into wealth because of massive salaries. And here's the part that breaks people's brains. The majority of people with $500,000 net worth live in homes worth less than $400,000. They're not in mansions. They're in normal 3-bedroom houses in normal neighborhoods. They drive cars that are on average 8 years old. They don't have luxury brands. They don't take extravagant vacations. In other words, the people with $500,000 are invisible. You wouldn't pick them out of a crowd. They look middle class because they live like middle class people, even though they have $500,000 in assets. Now let's compare that to the people who look wealthy. The doctor I mentioned in the hook, the one with the BMW and the big house and the private school tuition. The data shows that high-income professionals, doctors, lawyers, executives making $250,000 to $500,000 per year have shockingly low net worths relative to their income.
A study published in The Millionaire Next Door found that people in high-status professions consistently underaccumulate wealth. A doctor making $400,000 a year often has a net worth under $300,000 because their lifestyle expenses consume their income. The $150,000 house became a $900,000 house. The used Honda became a leased Mercedes. The public school became a $30,000 per year private academy. They're not building wealth. They're funding a lifestyle that signals wealth. And there's a massive difference. Let me introduce you to three real people who have $500,000 net worth. These are composites based on actual case studies, but the numbers are real. Meet Linda. She's 58, a retired elementary school teacher. She worked for 35 years in the public school system. Her peak salary was $68,000. She never made six figures in her life. She lives in a 1,400 square foot house she bought in 1995 for $140,000. It's now worth $320,000, and she paid off the mortgage 12 years ago. Linda's net worth is $580,000. How? She maxed out her 403(b) retirement account for 30 years. She drove the same Toyota Camry for 14 years. She took modest vacations. She didn't buy new furniture every 5 years. Her money compounded in boring index funds while she lived a totally normal, unglamorous life. You would never look at Linda and think she's wealthy, but she is. She can retire comfortably. She has more financial security than doctors making 5 times what she made. Meet Robert. He's 63, owns a small HVAC repair business. He never went to college. He started as an apprentice at 19, became a licensed technician at 25, and started his own business at 32. His business generates about $180,000 in revenue per year, and he pays himself a salary of $95,000. Robert's net worth is $720,000. How? He kept his business lean. No fancy office, he works out of his house. No expensive equipment leases, he bought used trucks and maintained them himself. He lived in the same house for 28 years. He invested 20% of his income every year into a SEP IRA. He never tried to look successful, he just quietly accumulated assets.
Again, you'd never know. Robert looks like a regular blue-collar guy, but he has more wealth than most executives. Meet Janet and Carl. They're both 55. Janet is a nurse making $82,000. Carl is an IT support specialist making $78,000. Combined income, $160,000, which is good, but not extravagant. They live in a 3-bedroom house worth $350,000. They drive a 2016 Honda CR-V and a 2014 Ford F-150. Their combined net worth is $890,000. How? They started contributing to their 401ks in their late 20s and never stopped. They never upgraded to a bigger house, even when they could afford it. They took road trips instead of European vacations. They said no to private school and invested the difference. They automated their savings and forgot about it. They don't look like millionaires, but they're 9 years away from being actual millionaires. These are the real $500,000 people. Not flashy, not high income, just relentlessly consistent and aggressively unimpressed by lifestyle inflation. So why do we get this so wrong? Why do we assume the doctor is rich and the plumber is broke when the data says the opposite? First, we conflate income with wealth. Income is what you make. Wealth is what you keep. A doctor making $400,000 who spends $390,000 is not wealthy. They're high-income poor. A teacher making $65,000 who spends $45,000 and invests $20,000 is building real wealth. We see the big salary and assume it translates to net worth. It doesn't, not automatically. Second, we're wired to notice signals, not reality. The BMW in the driveway is visible. The $200,000 in a Vanguard account is invisible. The big house screams success. The paid-off mortgage whispers security. Our brains are designed to assess status through visible markers because that's how humans have operated for millennia. But in the modern economy, those visible markers are often purchased with debt, not wealth. Third, high-income people face extreme lifestyle inflation pressure. If you're a doctor, you're surrounded by other doctors with nice homes and luxury cars. If you show up to the hospital parking lot in a 10-year-old Camry, people make assumptions about your success. The social pressure to spend is enormous. If you're a teacher or a plumber, nobody expects you to drive a Mercedes. You're free to live below your means without social penalty.
There is actually a term for this in economics: reference group theory. You compare yourself to your peer group, not to the population at large. Doctors compare themselves to doctors. Lawyers compare themselves to lawyers. And because everyone in that group is overspending to keep up, the entire group underaccumulates wealth. Meanwhile, the middle-class teacher compares themselves to other teachers and thinks, "I'm doing fine," and quietly becomes wealthy. Let me give you the actual statistical profile of someone with $500,000 net worth based on aggregated data from multiple studies. Age, 55 to 65. Wealth accumulation peaks right before retirement. It takes decades of compounding to hit $500,000 unless you're in the top 1% of earners. Household income, $100,000 to $150,000. Upper middle class, but not rich. Dual-income households where both partners work full-time in stable middle-tier professions. Home value, $250,000 to $400,000. They own their home, often outright or with a small mortgage remaining, but it's not a mansion. It's a normal house in a normal area. Cars, average age 8 to 12 years. They drive reliable used cars or keep new cars for a decade plus. They're not leasing, they're not upgrading every 3 years. Savings rate, 15 to 25% of gross income. They've been saving consistently for 20 plus years. It's automatic, it's non-negotiable. They don't think about it. Investment strategy, boring index funds. They're not day trading, they're not buying crypto, they're not picking individual stocks. They put money into low-cost index funds and ignored it for decades. Lifestyle, aggressively normal. They don't have designer clothes, they don't eat out 5 nights a week. They take 1 vacation a year, and it's usually domestic. They live well below their means, not because they're cheap, but because they value financial security over social signaling. Debt, minimal to none. No credit card balances, no car loans, maybe a small mortgage, but often the house is paid off. They treat debt like poison. This is the profile, and I guarantee it doesn't match what you pictured when you thought about someone with $500,000. So what do you do with this information? How does knowing this change your financial strategy? First, stop trying to look wealthy and start trying to be wealthy. Every dollar you spend on status is a dollar that's not compounding. The BMW lease, the designer handbag, the luxury vacation you post on Instagram, those are all anti-wealth purchases. They make you look successful while keeping you broke. Second, embrace being invisible. The path to $500,000 is boring. It's a paid-off house in a normal neighborhood and a 12-year-old car and index funds you never touch. If that sounds unsexy, good. Sexy is expensive. Boring is profitable. Third, focus on savings rate, not income. A teacher saving 20% of $65,000 will outpace a lawyer saving 5% of $250,000 over 30 years because of compounding. The math doesn't care about your job title. It cares about the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Fourth, automate everything and forget about it. The people with $500,000 didn't get there by constantly optimizing and stressing. They set up automatic contributions decades ago and lived their lives. Set it and forget it beats active management every time for regular people. And fifth, ignore your high-earning friends. If your friends are doctors and lawyers living in big houses and driving luxury cars, they're not your financial role models. They're your cautionary tales. Find the quiet millionaires, the unsexy savers, the people who retired at 58 with zero debt. Those are your people. Here's what I want you to take away.
The people with $500,000 don't look like what you think. They're not flashy. They're not high income. They're not lucky. They're just relentlessly consistent and immune to lifestyle inflation. If you're trying to build wealth, stop looking at what rich people buy and start looking at what wealthy people do. Rich people spend. Wealthy people save and invest. Rich people signal status. Wealthy people ignore status and compound money. You don't need a $300,000 salary to hit $500,000 net worth. You need a $100,000 household income, a 20% savings rate, and 30 years of not screwing it up. That's it. That's the formula. If this video changed how you think about wealth, share it with someone who's trying to keep up with people who are secretly broke. Hit subscribe because we're going to keep exposing the gap between looking rich and being wealthy. The real millionaires are invisible, and that's exactly why they're millionaires.